Welcome to SOS. My name is Lara, and I'm co-host free right now because this mini episode is kind of a one-off. I'm hoping you all caught my interview on the Due Dissidence Podcast. If not, check it out. Otherwise, this episode probably won't make a whole lot of sense. It was a great time, and they had some great questions, some of which I didn't have the answers for on the spot. So I'd like to take this chance to follow up on some of the things that came up. First, I want to more specifically address Keaton's question about why I'm running for Congress and not local office beyond just Andy Biggs. Don't get me wrong, I think that's a good reason. And people have pointed out correctly that I don't have the typical qualifications to run for Congress and suggested that I start with local office and work my way up. This is a valid point, and I have two responses. One is that I think having a Congress full of entrenched career politicians has caused more harm than good. I think my lack of formal experience in the political machine, while still being engaged politically, really is a strength, not a weakness. And the other reason is that I'm not an Arizona native. I know this could also be considered a liability. How can I think that I can represent the citizens of Arizona when I haven't been one of them for very long? This is also a valid question. All I can say is that I've lived in 7 states with an average about 5.5 years in each place. Having lived all over this country, Arizona is where I'm choosing to put down roots with my family. So I feel like I have a vested interest in the success of Arizona and will work hard for my chosen home state. Also, because I've moved so frequently, I've tended to focus my attention on national politics. I know the players in DC. I'm much more familiar with the ins and outs of Washington politics than state level politics. Because that is where my focus has been for the last 15 years, running for a local office would require a steeper learning curve than a federal position. And lastly, because yes, Andy Biggs is doing nothing for Arizona. Russell asked how many people are running for this seat. I didn't have an exact answer, and I still don't, because unlimited potential candidates could file petitions. On the Republican side, which for the primary is all that matters for me, Andy Biggs, me, and one other person have filed a statement of interest. This other person doesn't appear to have begun their campaign in earnest because they have zero online presence besides a LinkedIn profile. Compare that to the currently 17 candidates trying to win the primary for Senate to run against Mark Kelly in November. Keaton asked about the history of redistricting in Arizona and mentioned that in the past, Maricopa County was highly gerrymandered. I wasn't aware of the specific history of Arizona's gerrymandering, but it does not surprise me. Currently, Arizona's maps are drawn by an independent redistricting commission. At the time of the interview, I wasn't sure how long that commission had been in place. But in another Arizona progressive surprise, I found out that Arizona has had the commission in place for 20 years. The commission was the result of a 2000 ballot initiative. When talking about mask usage, Keaton mentioned the defiant spirit of libertarian ideals, specifically related to mask requirements. And I pointed to Arizona's libertarian streak. What we didn't get to is the reason behind the defiance. I do not think it is defiance for defiance sake, at least not wholly. It is true, Americans broadly and Arizonans specifically do not like to be told what to do. But what I think gets overlooked is that libertarians are correct to have a robust distrust in government. That distrust isn't random, it's well earned. The more I learn about history and politics beyond the superficial level, the more I learn just how frequently we're lied to by our government and our media. It's pretty disturbing. Keaton pointed out that I am not running from the word socialist, and he's right. I mentioned that on the political compass, I'm labeled as a libertarian socialist, but we didn't get into at all what that means. Unfortunately, I have yet to find a concise definition that fully encompasses my beliefs. Everything I've read is incredibly dense, long, and difficult to follow. So I'm going to try to explain my views specifically. Basically, the libertarian side of me recognizes that our government engages in serious overreach on a regular basis. They lie to us. They manipulate us into fatigued compliance. They know that if they keep us tired and hungry, we won't have time to even notice the manipulation, let alone do anything about it. The structure of these institutions exists to consolidate power into the hands of the few. Unlike liberal Democrats, libertarians don't fall for the party line. They look beyond the platitudes and the broken promises we are given as pacification. And libertarians know that when there is a power imbalance, those at the bottom are the first to suffer. They believe in standing up and fighting for their natural, God given rights, even if that means taking up arms against the government itself. Where I differ from classic libertarians like Rand Paul is that I think all of the evils perpetrated on us by the government, and worse, are committed against us by private companies. I recognize that all of the freedoms libertarians demand from our government, they almost unquestioningly surrender to their employers. Classic libertarians and I also disagree on what should be done about it. Most of them take the stance, I'll take care of me and mine, you worry about you and yours. And that just doesn't sit right with me. I think the way we flourish is together. Humanity has survived for millennia without profit as a motivator. I think it's time to look at the ways we can lift each other up instead of being pitted against each other for the scraps of the folks at the top. This needs to be done at the community level with the support of the federal government. I think it is the role of government to make sure that all of society's basic needs are met. Not met under certain conditions, no exceptions may apply. We need to invest in ourselves. I believe in the power of humanity to tackle huge problems facing us today, from climate change to poverty to the injustices of our legal system. But if 99% of us spend 99% of our time scrounging to barely meet our basic needs for survival, we have nothing left to tackle these imminent threats. The socialist in me recognizes that this is intentional. And just because it's the way we've always done things in this country is not a good reason to continue with the needless suffering. Because this is how we've always done it is the worst possible reason to do anything. I firmly believe that poverty is a policy choice, not an inevitability. I mentioned my healthcare plan, and we touched on my plan to pay for college, but I do want to clarify some things there. Russell asked me why I'm against free college. I told him that while I'm not against free college per se, I think that college students should contribute to their education in some way, to have some skin in the game, as it were, since we're talking about removing all the cost to students. I think that students should have to work a minimum number of hours, either at their school or in another civil service role, while they are attending school, up through a bachelor's degree. Russell compared this plan to Starship Troopers, and I get it. The difference is, in that movie, all of the hopeful future citizens had to attend a form of boot camp after high school, and this was a requirement not just for higher education, but for every aspect of life. As someone who has been to boot camp, I can confirm the level of brainwashing and propaganda consumption that goes on in those settings. My college plan is nothing like that. For one, it will only apply to people who want to go to college, not all U.S. citizens. And we're not talking any kind of required nationalist indoctrination. Bottom line, I think students need a free way to go to college, and I'm pretty open to ideas about how we do it. Keaton pointed out that if K through 12 education is free, then 13 through 16 should just be free as well. And I agree with the sentiment, but disagree with the premise. We have child labor laws that prevent exploitation of children's labor for a reason. College students are generally legally adults, and I think that they should have greater responsibilities than a fourth grader. I think working a part-time job while enrolled is a good option as an alternative to taking out loans. And if rich parents do not want their student to work and can't afford to pay for college, then fine, they should pay. And if a student does not want to work and does not have the ability to pay out of pocket for school, then there should be, as a last resort, a 0% interest government loan, not private loan, set up on effectual income-based repayment plans after graduation. This is also how I see us paying for education beyond a bachelor's degree. Obviously, this policy would be subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act and needs to be equitably accessible by everyone. We also talked about ways to reduce the number of credits required for a degree to about half of what they are now. I agree with Russell that looking at a degree as a career preparation, a more narrow focus, is all that should be required. However, I do think we should allow for the fact that not everyone gets a quality high school education. And because of that, I think we should provide up to the current credit requirements to allow students to have the option of rounding out their education instead of a narrower focus. In the end, Russell proposed a compromise. Would I agree to free tuition for everyone, no strings attached? and keep loans available for other expenses, such as room, board, textbooks, and fees. And I said, yes, sure, that would probably end up with a similar result to my proposal, and that the end goal is to make college education obtainable to anyone who wants it. I've put some more thought into Russell's proposal, and here's where I'm stuck on it. If you make tuition, and only tuition, free, and don't change anything else, many students will still be taking out penalizing loans with interest rates. So we've reduced the number and the amount of loans, which is a step in the right direction, but doesn't solve the actual problem. This is not to say that I think Russell's views on education funding are wrong at all, just that I think the in the moment compromise he proposed, that I, in the moment, agreed to, falls short. In one part of the conversation, I spoke about an MBA program I was briefly enrolled in, and I referenced a mantra on the benefits of capitalism. I said that this mantra was in large part my reason for withdrawing from the program, because otherwise I would be subjecting myself to indoctrination. I'm not going to walk that back in any way, because it's true, but it's also an incomplete picture of my views on capitalism. We're told that we're either capitalist, good, or anti-capitalist, aka communists, bad. I reject the premise that these are our only two options. I'm not a free market capitalist, but I recognize the need for commerce to exist. Trade needs to exist. Exchange of goods and services needs to exist. Businesses need to exist. Money needs to exist. What doesn't need to exist is exploitation. But to eliminate exploitation, we are going to have to make some drastic changes to the system of capitalism as we currently practice it. And we can do that without going full-on communist. It is a capitalist talking point that there is no middle ground, and it's a lie. One thing we touched on very briefly is my climate policies, or rather, lack of specific climate policies. I mentioned that I'm not running on a specific set of policies, but running on the idea that we need to do big things right now. I don't really have anything to add here other than what we discussed, but I want to make it clear that just because I don't personally have ideas on how to solve the problem doesn't mean I don't recognize that it is a problem, and it is beyond time to do what needs to be done, whatever that ends up being. We can't hide from this by denying it exists. That's childish. I'm not an expert in climate science or climate policy, but we do have experts in these fields. And I, as opposed to many top Republicans, plan to listen to those experts instead of denouncing them. Russell asked about how climate change is affecting Arizona specifically. I mentioned that in just this summer, Phoenix tied a record for the number of days in a row of 115 degrees or higher. And in the same summer, we are closing on a record of days with measurable rain set back in 1896, with days of measurable rainfall between June 15th and September 30th. That record is currently 24 days. As of August 21st, we were at 17 days of rain, with 6 weeks remaining in the monsoon season. It has rained several days since, but I can't find more current data. 87% of Arizona is still in a drought despite the record rain. Most of Maricopa County is in moderate drought, so it is doing comparatively better than much of the West. This year's record rains come after a couple years of almost no rain, with 2020 setting the record for the driest monsoon season in recorded history. We also rely heavily on snowmelt from northern states, and those states have also had very little precipitation in recent years. And lastly, there is one thing I didn't get a chance to mention. I'm still actively looking for a campaign manager. I'm figuring things out as I go, which I'm pretty good at, but having someone with campaign experience that could help focus my energy would be extraordinarily helpful. I really hope you guys enjoyed my interview with the Due Dissidence crew, and I hope you found this follow-up informative. We will return to our regularly scheduled programming next time.